Welcome back, everyone, to Tech Talk, the officially unofficial Transformers TCG podcast. I'm joined, as always, by Scott of VectorSigma.info, and you are listening to part 2 of our 2019 year in review. Please enjoy. Now, I put a brief thing in here after Origins because we did get the first promo cards for coming in with Wave 3, which was just, it was cool to see these things making their ways to stores and more things coming in. Again, it's more about where does Wizards see the game going, how is the game playing out, and how is the community accepting things. Was there anything that stood out to you to that before we move into actual Siege 1?
No, the only big thing about Res, like you said earlier, it was the set that we probably misjudged the most, and misunderstood the most because I think probably because we just played Wave 1 for so long by itself that it just took so long to actually adapt to what we saw in front of us that it seemed like there were so many shiny toys, but in reality, we should have been polishing up the shiny toys more often than trying to always find new ones.
Right.
Because again, it's just a time. So.
Yep. So from there, we get Siege 1. This will probably segue relatively quickly into Gen Con. And to your point, to your point, I wonder why. Yeah. To the point you were just making is that I think the lessons learned from the beginning half of the year, because at this point we're into June, July, have definitely, I don't want to say culminated, but they definitely influenced heavily the discovery period in Siege 1 and how we were attacking the Gen Con event. So before we dive right into Gen Con, Scott, any specific things that come to mind when we're talking Siege 1, like initial release Siege 1?
Only about the card's economics that I really don't want to get into on this podcast.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So then segueing directly into Gen Con, what do you feel the lessons were about preparation or from a testing standpoint or anything like that you wanted to discuss?
I mean, the big thing for me was that you also... So I think we had a month between Rise of the Combiners and the Constructicon set coming out of actual gameplay. Here, we weren't going to have that, so the immediate in-between release of Blaster Soundwave was coming out and legal for the exact same major event that was pretty much the only thing that anyone cared about, like even if there were locals.
Yep.
So it was almost like you had like an extended amount of the set, but you physically couldn't get your hands on it until like a week ahead of time. So that was the big thing, I think, for me. We couldn't... There was so much uncertainty. Like, I just remember, how did recover cassette work with these cassettes? How did some of these rules work? Like, a lot of things were being thrown in their head because we were having new cards thrown at us at the same time as having this other set thrown at us.
Yep.
And, how are we going to get our hands on it? We also had these Omnibots, how are we going to... And, thank you, Wizards. We were fortunate, you and I were fortunate enough to have these cards in our hands at the time, so that wasn't even a question. But...
Although they also did a good job of making sure there was enough. It did not appear there was any kind of shortage for Blaster vs. Soundwave at Gen Con.
No, certainly not. But it was a concern.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it felt like every week there was new things just being thrown at us, all over the place.
Yeah, I can definitely, almost to an exhausting degree.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's weird to say, but I felt like Siege 1 was kind of an underpowered set compared to the other two. I could probably argue that it's the least powerful set out of all four as of this standpoint.
Certainly in retrospect, I would agree.
Especially from a battle card perspective. That's the big thing. From a battle card perspective, I feel like it's certainly underpowered until... I mean, certain ones obviously have risen to the top, but at the same time, a lot of the ones that were good before have fallen off.
Right.
Secret actions in Siege 1, in my opinion, were extremely underwhelming.
Now, there is the looming shadow specter of Press the Advantage, which was still legal at the time.
Yep.
And looking back on it, I do wonder, because going into Gen Con, the anticipation was that it was going to be heavily orange slanted, like all over the place. You had these Lionizer builds that were just running amok across the internet, and then there was a ton of orange stuff that, jumped out at you. If we didn't have press, how much different would that event have looked? And I on one hand, I feel like, well, yeah, then Shockwave and friends make an appearance. We probably would have seen a lot more General Megatrons. Whether they would have actually succeeded or not is another story, but I feel like we would have seen a lot more. Whereas it, almost to an extent, it felt like it shortcutted for everybody a lot of the evaluation, because it's just like, well, I could do this thing, or I could just press the advantage something into oblivion. And it definitely jump-started or pivoted a lot of the perspectives, I think.
Yeah, and I think we forgot to mention the swap parts ban. That was in between.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that was before Origins. That's a good catch. I always forget about that.
Yeah, and there was that broken combo deck.
Well,
it dealt with.
I guess the major point there is, again, beating the dead horse of learning where the unofficially official boundaries are from Wizards of like, no, this is not okay. Which it did. Okay, so here's a good point, and it's something when everybody takes up their torches and pitchforks on the internet, like the internet loves to. Clearly, Wizards is invested. Clearly, they care, and that they were willing to do something drastic, and we're going to touch upon this again when we get to later in the year, but they're not just going to let something fester. They know what they're doing, and I know people I've seen a lot of snide comments on various ban posts, clearly aimed at the Wizards team, and it's like, look, everybody's human, but also they're clearly trying to produce a good product. They care enough that they're going to take these actions if appropriate.
And I think that was actually a ban that happened before Organized Play. Like, it was just...
Well, it was right before... Like, I think they announced it, and then shortly thereafter was a swap, and somebody will probably correct me on this, but I think it was like shortly thereafter when it was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a problem for when Organized Play goes into effect. So we're going to do something about it now.
I just don't remember anybody whining that just got ruined. That's why I thought it might have been earlier, but I don't...
It could be.
I might have just been so inundated with getting prepared for Origins that I didn't even care. I wasn't playing any kind of weird combo, but
right.
But yeah, I mean, so I would say that was the least impactful because, again, there was no giant organization.
Right.
I would say the press was impact.
Yeah, and we'll bring that up again. It was an idle thought as we were discussing Gen Con that it played a significant role in addition to all of the constant stream of new content, new cards that you were referencing. And this was the first big event that I got. Well, I mean, I guess PAX 2, because this is the third PAX this year. Mm-hmm. So they pre-EI PAX. This is the first really big Transformers event that I got to play in. I thought it was awesome. I agree with your earlier points about the way that the flights worked for qualifying, and I'm hoping we see them return. Yes, there are issues. I think it's a pretty solid system regardless. And obviously that's where I got my queue, so I was okay with it overall. At the end of the day.
I'm not saying I think there should be like one to the end, but I mean...
Mm-hmm. So before I derailed everything with the press and other bans, what were your other thoughts from Gen Con takeaway, whether it's meta-wise, it's some more Siege 1 thoughts, anything along those lines?
The big thing is just, again, like no stones left unturned. I mean, like we played decks that were heavily influenced set. I think the biggest takeaway for me from the event, we should have had more confidence in a deck that was completely built from the new set in Blaster, which would have the right call for Sunday been for.
Right. Now, to be fair, it was also like that deck was literally constructed the weekend before and like finalized the weekend before, which seemed to be at this stage now a recurring theme, but at least to some extent.
Yeah.
So
I think it was definitely the more unfair of going.
Mm.
And that's where I think that, like, I mean, obviously we did great at the event. We all 32 top. I top forward with the General Optimist deck, but it played too fair compared to what Blaster could do. And I ran it in the Saturday qualifier. Very good. You know, you qualified with it. You played with, I beat it with, obviously. But the right call would have been to play that deck on Sunday. I think my matchups would have been. I mean, I'm pretty sure I would have made the finals instead of losing my top 4 matchup if I was playing Blaster.
Gotcha.
I'm pretty positive that I would have. So, just from a Spheres perspective,
I was about to say. So this is around the time where I think you posted the Spheres article.
No.
When did
a couple months later?
Was it that much
later? Where the origins of it, no pun intended, came from our testing for Gen Con, but like it bore itself out at the event as well.
Absolutely.
But it was posted after Press was banned because Press messed up the Spheres so much because, like, for example, like you couldn't run a 3-wide Shockwave when Press still existed.
Right.
So like that whole theory was kind of out the window. There was no control deck because like Optimus Prime Battlefield Legend really wasn't that good anymore, and like you couldn't run Shockwave in a world of presses.
Yep.
So like that whole sphere didn't exist because of one card, really. So honestly, the theory could only come when you had a balanced card pool to work with. And I think honestly, one caveat to the whole theory could be that, like that. I think we see that even now, where we don't think 3-wide aggro strategy because the card pool just doesn't support it. I think, you know, the card pool just didn't support a 3-wide control deck existing because of the existence of Press. So that's okay. It's just that things get out of whack when you go rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock to just rock, paper, scissors.
Yes.
Or 4, whatever you want to say.
I got you.
But, you know, I think the big thing there is just to have confidence in, not only confidence in what you tested for a short period of time, but like understand the power level of what you're dealing with here. I mean, the deck was able to operate on both players' turns, which no other deck could do without the use of multiple cards. One of the cards that was able to exist was a character, so it was obvious. I mean, you were basically getting, and again, this pushed that same envelope that we mentioned earlier about stars. You got 2 free stars by playing the deck, let alone if you were. There was no really good version ever of playing all 3 cassettes, but if you ever went that route, you got 3 free stars out of the deal. So, you know, I just think understanding what is like above the power curve instead of being at the, like, above the power curve, not at the top of it, if that makes any sense. Like, I feel like a lot of decks are still on that curve, but sometimes there's decks that are literally above it. That break it. And I feel like at the time, that deck broke the power curve, given the ability to play Press, given the ability to interact turn with Ramhorn, given the ability to sometimes just hit for what?
A bazillion.
11 on turn, like 13 on turn 1.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
You can definitely do some really unfair things.
Yeah, with a Battlemaster, with Press, with Peace or Tyranny, etc. So, like, you know, what's the power of getting extra plays? Like, that's where that deck came into play.
And I think you had said it a couple times there, but to reiterate, one of the most important takeaways is look for the most potentially oppressive, the most powerful thing that you can do. And to your earlier point about Wave 2 and refining the quote-unquote good stuff, you find the thing that does all the best stuff or does one thing so well that it can obliterate everything else, or, mostly everything else, and then hone that weapon as opposed to try and spread it thin. Like you said, in retrospect, it's easy to say, yeah, we should have all played Blaster because it did all these unfair things. But I think just like when we started out with saying, okay, we needed the 3-wide Optimus, it had to exist before we get to the next stage. This was kind of one of those, okay, well, yeah, just doing really unfair things sometimes is enough, and you just get there. So I think that was, at least for me personally, it definitely was a turning point where now that's constantly at the forefront as I'm looking for other things. Well, what does this do uniquely? Can that be leveraged, and how far can that be leveraged?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we're going to get something as obvious as just get to play a free card every other turn and also get extra stars, but you never know.
Yeah, like I said, the big thing is just understanding when you have something that's really the envelope and be willing to take the opportunity to play it, even in a setting where it's like do or die type situation.
Yep. So in between Gen Con and Siege 2, we did get that press ban, which clearly changed a lot of things and caused us to reevaluate a lot of stuff leading up to it. But in between also was the entire EIQ season, which was
and then
a little bit of a big deal. And what?
And the start of the PPG tour, I think, was actually after the ban. Well, no, it was after the banning, so I think so.
Yes? Question mark?
Or did they play it with the banning? I don't remember.
No, I think you're thinking of that other rules change that was later.
Okay.
I think. But
regardless, I don't know if Columbus had it.
Yeah, it was around that time frame. So
yeah,
the EIQ season as a whole, I think everybody had their own ideas coming in as to how it would shape up and how it influenced things. We, in our interview with Drew from the Energon Invitational, we did have a chance to pick his brain a little bit. You put forth some thoughts, Scott. Do you still feel the same way? Do you, now that you've had even more time to think about it, do you feel differently about the EIQ season? Presumably, we're going to see an EIQ season again this coming year. So what would you suggest people do to prepare differently? Or other thoughts, I guess?
I think it was great. I think in some places, again, where the player base wasn't able to make it out to a lot of the larger events, these tournaments formed the culmination of their season.
Mm-hmm.
So there was just a limited amount of play that they could do. And this was, they had to qualify at this one event or these two events that existed.
Right.
So, that was the big thing for me, for people that weren't in our area. And then for people that were in our area, it was just a matter of like being able to go to a tournament where a decent number of people showed up and wanted to have something to play for, I think was very, very obvious.
Yes.
I think the effect of, quote, having something to play for beyond the prizes. And I knew this in my 20 years of playing, or 25 years, I guess, of playing TCGs, is that's what people want. And that's why a lot of people play. They don't play for the actual physical prize. They play for glory of what that prize brings to them, I guess you could, like, whether it's qualification, whether
the real prize was inside all along, Scott.
Right. That's clearly not the answer.
No, I mean, it kind of is to what you're saying. Like, the actual going, testing your metal kind of thing, and coming out on top, and then having, like you said, something to hang on your wall, so to speak, like a badge of pride kind of thing, because, well, I qualified for the first ever Energon Invitational, and then I'm going to go play with the big dogs, as opposed to just, it's a bunch of boxes.
Yeah, it's A leading to B leading to C. And I think as long as you have that, there's an incentive to play an A. And when you only have A leading to B, and it's constant like that, like a lot of times once you have qualified, you may not show up again.
Right.
And again, as the game grows, I may be old man yelling at clouds, because it won't exist. But but in general, I think as long as if it was to remain that way, I see that problem potentially existing.
Yes. Now it does sound, at least from what Drew has said publicly, that we're going to get a similar structure this coming year, which isn't necessarily bad. I just hope that more people go, hey, it's worth continuing to play, that playing in the events has other value just from a staying competitive standpoint, learning the card pool, testing theories, competing for the sake of competing. But yeah, there is a potential concern there.
I think the current system, if it was to continue, puts a lot of pressure on the player base to ensure, like, oh, Store A isn't having the qualifier the same time as Store B. Or...
Yes. I mean, that is definitely going to be a thing that has to be addressed. And just greater coordination within geographical areas, so it isn't, we'll all have our qualifiers on the same day and then wonder why 4 people showed up at each of them. Well,
right,
because there's 10 of them, and you're all within a few miles of each other. Like, that's just not going to work. Do you feel that... I'm trying to figure out how to phrase a question meta-wise, that how the evolution worked from Gen Con to the end of EIQ. Do you think it was a natural progression, like it would have happened anyway? Do you think it was a direct result of the way the qualifiers shaped up? Anything along those lines, that, like, I'm going to my first event of the 2020 EIQ season, like, any tidbits from there that you think stand out?
No, because not enough stuff was reported. So specifically, I don't have that answer that I'd like to have. So no, I don't have an answer.
Got it.
Because there wasn't a formal, or I should say informal, result recording process to even have a third party collect the information and report out on what the metagame looks like this week, what the metagame looks like next week. And to be honest with you, a lot of that is, again, because of the free-for-all nature of, there was this 4-person event in Timbuktu, and there was this 30-person event in a high geographic area. They carry the same prize. Or there was this 2-pack event being played incorrectly in this EIQ.
About that.
So the free-for-all nature of it hurt the ability to actually see that. And in my opinion, as a competitive player, what the enjoyment of watching these seasons develop is. So I don't have an answer because I just don't know. And I also know personally, like, we were playing different decks every week just to play them because they, quote, didn't mean anything to us.
Right. And from our perspective, it was what we were talking about, or what I had said earlier about, for the love of the game, but also to experiment with these other cards, learn more about how other interactions.
Yeah, but to anybody else I recommended, or like to any patrons or anything, like what decks to play, it was always basically, it was still heavily influenced from Gen Con and from the testing we did leading into it, and it was not based on EIQ results.
Right.
At all.
Well, like you said, there wasn't much to go on, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
Which, so it is what it is. Hopefully next time around we will get, whether it's some first party initiative or it is just everybody wants to brag about, I won my EIQ with this. This is what was there. I'm hoping that, and it is, I joke about it being bragging, but it is something that is a useful tool. It's not just a way to pump your ego. It really does help the community as a whole to give people who are like, hey, I want to get into this. I don't have a clue what I'm doing or where to start.
Right.
So, excuse me. Any other thoughts about the EIQ season or that time frame between Gen Con and Siege 2?
No, it was great. It was great. Like I said, it was great to have people come out every week. And I know in the community, there was a great, there was a lot of pressure on people and things like that. So I know it existed, just didn't personally exist for us.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun time, and it was great to play in these different events. Like you said, play for something. There was something on the line, and it definitely felt different than playing for a bunch of boxes or store credit or something like that. It psychologically it was different going through those events, which was cool. But then I'm getting ahead of myself. It led into Siege 2.
And the press ban.
And the what?
And the press ban.
Well, we talked a lot about that. Did you have something else you wanted to throw in there for the press ban? Okay.
It was just good to see that they would react to a deck building issue, not necessarily a play issue.
Exactly. And so to get the other one out of the way, because it's going to be part of Siege 2 before we lead into EI, the multi-mission gear ban, which is another thing that, again, reinforces the idea that Wizards cares. It also, because this one's a little bit weird to phrase, but I feel like they're willing to push boundaries on things which clearly there are going to be some missteps. Like, it's going to happen when you try and push boundaries, that you're going to step over a line somewhere that you didn't realize was a problem, or maybe it explodes into a bigger issue than you had anticipated. But it's worth, I think, doing that in order to continue to create interesting gameplay experiences. Mm-hmm. As opposed to they could take a super safe route and just, this set is not even a half a step more. It's like 1/10 of a step more, a few toes more than the last one. And then 10 years from now, we're finally getting to somewhere really interesting, as opposed to just comparing numbers. I think it's worth that they are both. It's worth mentioning that they are both going to push the envelope, but be willing to seal it back up, I guess. I don't really have a cliche to close that one out.
I know what you mean.
So I figured I'd get the multi-mission gear piece out of there. We'll clearly be talking about Daring Escape shortly, but you had mentioned earlier that you felt Siege 2 and Wave 2 were significantly more powerful than Siege 1. But other than just the plain power level, what felt different leading in with this and then ultimately into EI?
I guess the power level of the cards is just so much higher. It's also clearly, this set I could tell was created to basically push out a lot of the powerhouses from all the way from the beginning of the game. This set allows for way more interaction on opponent's turn, just very, very powerful secret actions.
Yep.
The character health pools are just so gigantic that can't rely on incremental damage happening from different angles. Like, you have to put the envelope on the numbers that you're doing.
Yeah, you had said, or maybe did you say this offline? I'm trying to remember. It definitely, to your point about it referring back to previous metagames and then it eventually rearing its head in these sets where you can see the answers to like the thing before. And I distinctly recall a lot of people at local events in various conversations said, oh, well, wouldn't it be nice if they just had one more point of defense or just handful more hit points? Well, now they do. And now you can see exactly where and how the game shapes up with those parameters set that way.
Yeah, and it's obvious that like the numbers that they were going to be able to push from like a control deck perspective, the 14 hit points on Optimus Prime Battlefield Legends just aren't enough anymore.
It's funny to think about that, but yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the big point is the cries that people had of certain just weren't true because those cards don't really exist in the metagame anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, like anything else, it's and I've said this a lot on other shows. This game is very much baby's first card game in a lot of respects, and it is where there are those lessons of these decks aren't going to last forever. These strategies aren't necessarily going to last forever, unless you abstract it to like, yes, there will always be aggro decks. Yes, there will always be control decks, sort of thing.
Right. Right.
But the ebb and flow of any particular card, any particular archetype is going to happen as you see things evolve, whether that's an artificial thing such as a ban, or it's just the natural new cards came out. Everybody understands the game better. People are playing tighter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think this set also is one of the ones I guess a lot of the other sets felt very insular.
Very what?
Like insular.
Okay.
Like if you're going to run a combiner team, you're obviously running. Now, it's like, even if your main character comes from this set, a lot of times your supporting character don't. So, we didn't leave anybody behind. Like the power creep happened in the main characters, but not necessarily in the support character. So, it's
you
hard
still
to
have a variety.
It's hard to power creep out Flame War. Hard to power creep out like some of the staple mid-level characters like Prowl from Rise of the Combiners, and so it's hard to power out some of those, or even General Optimus from Siege 1, which is clearly, arguably, I don't even know if you can argue it, like, just popular and powerful character that came out of that set.
Right.
But even like the Blaster deck is obviously very insular to just running card. Our version was literally just characters from that whole set.
Right.
Whereas this set seems to want to play with other sets pretty cohesively. Even when you take a patrol into perspective and things like that, a lot of times they're running them. The off character is still from another set, typically.
Right. So
I think that, yeah.
Oh, God, I was going to say, to extrapolate your point, we're now hitting the. I mean, maybe we were always there to some extent, but we're hitting the point where it really is. Yeah, you're going to have the self-contained deck out of the new set, but it's also a matter of reevaluating previous characters to, okay, well, now I have my new big centerpiece guy. It's Jetfire. It's Galaxy Prime. It's whatever. And now I outfit them or flank them with these other characters. I don't know if I guess the Airstrike Patrol plus Nemesis plus Springer plus General Optimus kind of fits the wider decks, because then they're not a centerpiece sort of build. Yep. But you get these more variety-driven compositions than you did in the past. Is that where you're going with it?
Yeah, throughout the sets, not just insulated set.
Right. So the point being, when Wave 5 hits, it is going to be a wider investigation of, okay, where do these pieces fit? Does this suddenly make this other composition more viable because it shores up this hole, as opposed to just, okay, I'm going to scoop up my combiner team and drop it on the table.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right.
So the other piece that we have to mention is the daring escape part. We've said a lot of words about it, but I do understand the designs team desire for this additional axis and the way it interacts. And I think it is something in concept very interesting. Like, just the idea of hitting on this additional axis so that it changes up that rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock scenario with this other piece to throw a wrench in things. A lot of people have said a lot of words about how this particular iteration bears out. I think going forward, I'm curious whether we're going to see something like this, not in the way Daring Escape plays, but something on this axis every set from here on out, once a year from here on out. How is that going to play out? I'm very curious going forward, but time will tell on that one.
I mean, I think anytime they print flashy, powerful effect battle, the 25 of the 40 cards are going to look the same, and you just eventually get to the singular, which is, again, I'm on record many times. So I think you're going to continue to see it as long as they print anything that basically allows in the battle deck to overtake its own.
In the battle deck to what? You were breaking up, Scott.
That overtakes the game on its own as a one-time effect.
Mm.
I mean, it could draw 10 cards for all I care. It could be something like that. Doesn't necessarily have to say win the game.
Yeah, there's some things that are close enough.
Right. And if they continue to push the envelope in those things.
Did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. It was starting to get weird at the end, so
lost one.
Gotcha. So Siege 2, before we dive into EI, because that's the next thing, any other takeaways from there? Did you have the same sort of epiphanies that you did in Rise of the Combiners and Siege 1 with either card evaluation, meta evaluation, or was this just a continuation of the previous thoughts?
I don't think as many stones were left unturned. I think patrols were looked at more seriously than they were, obviously. I don't think there were any new strategies that occurred as a result of it, because there weren't new, because it's the second set of a quote block. So you weren't going to get we didn't just discover Battle Masters. We didn't just discover Micromasters and things like that. Still never used one for its tab ability ever. But you
would be correct.
But I think things like flip density pushed even more now. I think that's certainly one of them.
Yeah, I think beyond the power level that you had mentioned earlier, it's good that you brought up flip density, because I think Siege 2 reinforced a lot of the existing theories about the game, whether it's flip density, whether it's spheres, whether it's, pick other thing that we've talked about ad nauseum, that it definitely reinforced and supported those ideas. And they kind of, the through line is there.
Those ideas. Yep. Mm-hmm. Those universal ideas.
What was that?
Those universal ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as opposed to I don't want to come up with a card on the spot, something that suddenly turned one of those things upside down. Like you said, the press for the press to spheres comparison, where it kind of broke some of that down because of what it did. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we have something like that in Siege 2 that I can think of offhand. But to be fair, I'm very tired, so maybe I'm missing something.
No, and it's still early in this match.
Right.
I don't think we need to even spend a lot of time on the Siege section or even the EI section.
Yeah.
It's all fresh in everyone's mind.
Of course. I mean, all of this is, of course, caveated with the exception of Daring Escape and that whole thing. But like you said, we talked a lot about those. So moving from there into EI, we got Dan's mug up on screen again. What are the major takeaways from the first World Championship?
I mean, I guess their hard work pays off.
The
play skill is a thing, that card evaluation is a thing, that deck building is a thing, having a team is a thing, all the things and we'll probably continue to talk about for the next 6 months and forever.
Well, I was about to say, a bunch of those topics that you brought up, we do have tentatively slated for the future, because they are relevant things that seem, without getting too far into it, like teams, they mean certain things, but as I joke with people offline, words mean things, and you come to learn that they don't mean the same thing to everybody. And the capacity in which they do or do not mean certain things influences all these conversations and a lot of the research that goes into preparing for these events.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me now is just that, again, going into an event like this, you need a much more flexible strategy and a more understanding of the game than a very linear one. I still think that, people that went in, and whether they knew it or not, just with serious weaknesses to certain obvious strategies, just it didn't go well.
Well, a lot of that comes back to preparation, which, I mean, like you put it succinctly, that hard work pays off. And putting in the effort, and I don't want this to come across as insulting to anybody. I don't want to say, oh, well, sucks to be you, you just didn't put in the effort. It's like, okay, well, did you go about it the right way? Like, you could hammer out 1,000 games if you're playing all the test games from a certain perspective incorrectly. You're just wasting your time, sort of thing. And we'll beat these topics to death and have in the past and will in the future, but there's definitely a lot that goes into that.
Well, I think the other big thing though for me was the effort didn't necessarily have to come.
The effort didn't necessarily what?
Didn't have to come from physically playing games.
Yes.
Like it came from phone conversations, meetings.
Right.
Not holding the cards in our hands. And I think part of what you're saying about like the hard work paying off is also the understanding of the game and the culmination of all of the efforts of 2019 building to one event is what we're trying to explain to everybody is an iterative process of everything we
right,
and thus being able to short in the end how we had to prepare, and there were certain truths that we held to that we knew and didn't have to relearn in a short period of time leading up to an event, unlike leading up to Gen.
Right.
So
makes sense.
But it's, like you said, it's a larger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Each one individually.
Yeah, there's no way to tackle it in this particular recap, but there's.
And I think we're on hour 2 already.
Oh yeah, we're at 1 hour 59 minutes according to my clock. Now to be fair, there's like 10 minutes in there that was just the countdown. But anyway, so that kind of closes out the 2019 stuff before we'll do a brief 2020 preview sort of thing and bring up a couple notes. But any closing thoughts on the year, highlights of the highlight reel?
I mean, I guess the one thing that I will say that I think as a group, content creators, players, we tried to focus this podcast on the things that we could have taken away from a gameplay perspective so that you as a listener, sorry.
Uh-oh.
Bentley. But I think we learned a lot about, I mean, I learned a tremendous amount about e-commerce, about content creation, all these different things.
Yep.
Throughout the year, about social media, about, you name it from the internet space. I learned a lot this year. Right. Web design, like whatever. Monetization is a big one, I guess. So, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of that is what is pretty much the only stuff I can concretely say we're going to be focusing on going forward because it's the only things I know right for 2020. So
I was going to say that kind of segues into the 2020 plan. So do you want to highlight that before we make some absurd predictions?
Yeah, I would say the two biggest things we learned in 2019 were the goal of daily content creation just wasn't realistic from a impact perspective. I think we felt pressure every single day to put out something that was like a cornerstone article, video, post, whatever. And I think that's just unrealistic, no matter how many people you have.
There are only so many cornerstones.
Yeah. And I mean, like, how do I say this? People just don't care half the time. So, like, unless you're really...
Yeah.
Unless you're really signposting something in bright lights, like, you need to read this, like...
And even if you are, there's always going to be a counterfaction, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, so, like, it didn't always mean anything. I just think I think some of the quality at certain times suffered as a result of it. And I think we also discovered there was a certain audience that we preferred to satisfy, and that was basically the audience that showed a desire to want to hear and take in the content. So that's the first part of what we've learned in 2019 and pushing towards 2020 is just that we know who that audience is. We know we're trying to understand how to serve their needs best. And that way is by not having as much immediate public content and just reaching that audience that we know wants to be reached and wants to be helped, how we can help them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you don't want to be if you don't want to improve your competitive play, you're probably not listening as I speak anyway, whether live or after the fact. So I can't reach you regardless. I don't think we can reach you no matter what. So I'd rather put my efforts in people that I know want the assistance and like I can talk to it doesn't have to necessarily be on a one-on-one basis, although it is often. But I can put like a gameplay scenario in front of them and explain like why you should attack that way or why you should defend that way. Whatever I'm explaining to them, why you should play this card over another card, why that card you pitched on turn 1 to go get that green cost you the entire.
Right. Oh, there's something to be said. Know what you do well and do it well.
I just don't think that a certain percentage of the population is going to care about that type of thing because that's just not why they're here. They're here,
which again is fine. Yeah, the game being a licensed game is going to attract people from. I mean, it sounds weird, but I guess all walks, and you can find your enjoyment. And that's why I brought it up when we were talking about Wave 2 is when you're evaluating the game and your place in it, I guess, you need to think about how you want to interact with the game, how you want to interact with the community, or I guess on all those fronts or not. And that's going to drive and help you enjoy the game more. There's no point in forcing yourself to do something you don't like. I don't really enjoy playing any card games casually, so I don't. That's why I lean into the competitive side. So, and it's fine if it happens to be the opposite for you personally. Although, like you said, I don't know how many people are listening to this and really follow that sentence, or at least to that end.
Right. That's one change. And the other one is just YouTube is a hard nut to crack. So, I think there's things that we've learned. I think our segment of the community that we're trying to reach, again, to piggyback off the point we just talked about, the type of content that we typically put out there on YouTube may not appeal to a mass audience, but they're looking for, which it's probably like gameplay videos and things like that. We plan to do more of them, but again, I think we're just doing it a service just by giving you untested ideas because we tried to stand by showing gameplay videos of stuff that we would take to a tournament, stuff like that. We just don't have the ability to just like...
Well, by definition, you can't thoroughly test something as quickly as you can just throw something together and fling it at the wall. Like,
right, and if
that's just how it works.
If our choice is to film, like if we were like we did a couple again Patreon-based playtest sessions on video, and if we were to release that publicly, we're just doing a disservice to the people that want that information and are coming to us for that information. So, again, they're tested decks and they're out there, and we just want to, like, it's just not possible to put out that type of content on a regular basis unless we, like, yes, we all live, quote, close to each other, but it would still take, like, an hour to get everything set up and then
to film a couple hours of play. I can't.
Yeah. Right. So, we're going to try different ways. We're going to try different things to reach everybody, but it's just a tough nut to crack because I guess I don't really know what the right phrase is. Like, form over function is all I can think of, but I don't really know how to explain it. But like, I feel like the information that we give out even publicly has a lot of value to it, and just because it's presented in a way where they see an icon of me and you on the screen and some weird background stuff doesn't mean that there's anything less to take in yet. I don't know. Maybe they'd rather see emojis flying across the screen. I don't know. I mean, it's something I still don't really understand. So
yeah, it's but to that end, I guess people out there listening, if you have suggestions for it, I know I'm
Yes.
willing to listen to ideas or how should we improve things. I mean, yes, I know.
I'm not willing to listen to those ideas. No,
Well, we need. I know we need to get Scott a microphone, and we need to get him to sit in one place when we do it.
And I have dogs. Right?
Yeah,
exactly.
no. Let's not go too far, Scott. We're not going to go that far.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, yeah, if you have suggestions or how you would like content presented or what you think would be beneficial, we're definitely all ears on that front. So
yeah, we plan to do things like focus groups and things like that, to be honest with you, at events.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we know our bread and butter is events, and we know our bread and butter is organized play.
Absolutely.
And we know there's a growing segment of the population that would like information on that. And frankly, I don't think there's a large segment of the population that's out content.
Right.
Like, we're willing, like, that's going to always remain our bread. That's going to remain our bread and butter. And so, like, one of the things we're definitely doing for 2020 is pushing going to events more often.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, like a few of us are going to Orlando, for example, to go to the PPG tour. Like, those of us that are qualified, or even those that aren't, that's the upcoming event for us. But like, once the rest of the PPG, or not the rest, but like the season 3 of the PPG tour is announced, like, we're going to make an effort to go to every single one of those events, no matter where they are, whether it's driving distance, whether it's flying, like whatever, because we don't feel like we can actually give out proper information unless we're actually physically there to get it.
Yeah.
Or to...
There's something to be said for being there in person.
Or to create it. We can't continue to hold ourselves out as experts if we're not even showing up for the event to win.
Right.
I'm not saying we have to win every event, but like, we can't even, if we don't even give ourselves a chance, like, there's no point in even talking about it. Like,
something, you miss 100% of the shots, something like that.
Right, exactly.
I've heard a saying about that somewhere.
I've seen it on Michael Scott's board.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I got it from. Yeah, Dan's got the right idea. We need to invest in doggy cams, which I would, but my dog only likes to hang out sometimes down here. Other times she's, doing her rounds and guarding the house, which she would probably just run if anything happened, but that's a different story. I would, for me, in 2020, I would definitely love to do more Transformers related streaming. Obviously, Scott, you had the opportunity to do some casting. If there are opportunities there, it's something we could probably look into as well. I anticipate there's probably going to be a few people who suggest that as a thing. Just we'll see how the logistics work.
Yeah, again, it's just a technology thing. Like, I think going back and looking at some of the matches that haven't been publicly releasing and doing commentary on them first before releasing them is definitely possible. I think our partnership with PPG will allow us to do that at some of the larger games that occur at those events as well.
Right.
Again, and I also want to put my money where my mouth is in terms of that whole concept of people want to play for something. I'm going to be talking to the PPG folks about, like, could we have had these qualifiers earlier in the quote season? I know why they didn't, because it's not a Transformers thing. It's mostly for the other games that existed for the last, 11 or 12 months of this season. Yeah. So maybe there's an opportunity in the future to have these kit level events on a monthly basis at your store, like that, a way to formalize it. I think it's a great opportunity, and it's something I'm going to be talking to them about in Orlando. So
absolutely.
Just know that a lot of the things that I say, I'm trying to find solutions from a competitive community perspective to make them into a reality in the best way that I can.
So, there's other famous sayings about, getting involved. Pick your cliche of choice about not just complaining about things, but trying to enact some sort of change. There are, of course, limitations on an individual's level, what they can or can't do, or what they're, let's face it, it is a hobby. It's not your professional life for most people listening to this, maybe everybody listening to this. So you will have limitations, but that doesn't mean that there's literally nothing that you can do. Talk to your local store, talk to your local community, reach out to some of these people. They're not as intimidating as they might seem on the internet, kind of thing.
No, my commitment, though, for 2020 is to try to be like that source for you to talk from a competitive standpoint about how to improve things in your area and things like that. And I'll do everything in my power with the connections I have to make some of these things into realities.
Yep.
So I already have calls out to all the people we've talked about. So
awesome. Well, Scott, to close out, I have the graphic up there from the slight teaser we got about Wave 5 coming out in April. Do you have one wild prediction, whether it's about Wave 5 or anything else in 2020 for the Transformers TCG that you want to throw out there?
I think what's been shown in the last, especially in Siege 2, was that it seems to me like they're trying to blur some of the line. The colors of your deck having to be like monochrome.
Right.
And I think we obviously, I piloted a deck at Gen Con that was very similar to that. I think even the deck we piloted at the Energon Invitational had a decent amount of all color pips, but I think that they're going to continue to push that because it just opens up variety in deck building.
Absolutely.
And so I hope and I assume that things like the Airstrike Patrol, I know we bring them up a lot, but obviously I think they're the shining example of this, where you have a non-combat color pip influencing combat in such a powerful way that I think that they'll continue to push that. I think we saw that with...
I think that successful experiment, is definitely going to be continued in some capacity.
Yeah, I think like the white pips matter cards, like erratic armor and cannon, whatever they're called, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And acute reflexes to an extent, trying to push the white pips having a secondary use. I just think the reason they don't see as much play is because it requires like almost a mini combo of drawing the battle card and not having it be on the character. It's the whole argument of like Ramhorn versus Bolster type of thing.
Right.
So I think we will continue to get that. I also hope that we will continue to get subtle ways of interacting on your opponent's turn. Again, coming back to the Ramhorn secret action type thing.
Right.
So like, I do think the two biggest improvements to the game in 2019 were secret actions and green pips. So I do think that both of those will get pushed.
Yeah.
I assume we will probably see at least one new pip color sometime during the year. I have no guesses or no idea what that would be.
Who knows what that's going to do? It could be anything.
Right.
It could even be a boat.
Yes. So those will be my big ones.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like characters and things like that, I have no idea because the cartoon is coming out, I think, in the summer.
Right.
Is that correct?
Sounds right. I haven't followed it as much as the what I've been looking for details about the new toy line to see if both interest in the toys and also to see if there are any clues there. But there's not a huge amount yet of information. Yeah. I mean,
so until we know all of that, I don't think there's any way to guess what the character selection will be, because I think not next set, because they already said it's going to be a throwback set, but for the sets after, I assume they tie directly into that. I would, in some way, shape, or form. So.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I have a lot of hopes for what will end up being in a set, but I don't really have any justification that they're going to be there. Like, I'd love to see the combiners that never made it, like the Combaticons. I'd love to see, like you said, from a gameplay perspective, more green pips, although I do, to our earlier discussion, I wonder if they're going to go that far, or is there going to be a new pip color that smooths things in a different way, like a wild card pip somehow. I don't know how that mechanic would play out, but something that or how it would be functionally different than just having multiple pips. But the wild card thing could be something that comes out. It's all just wild speculation at this stage. There's a lot of year ahead of us, and I'm excited to see what ends up showing up.
Yep, agreed.
So, well, I think we did it at about 2 hours. I'm going to say that with the 10 minutes in there. It says 2:16, so yeah, a little over 2 hours. Never mind.
So two shows as usual?
Yeah, I'll probably split it somewhere in the middle of the year. It seems appropriate.
Yep.
And this time I have graphics so I can find the chopping spot easier. But anyway.
There you go.
As always, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And please tune in next time for more Tech Talk.